All right, welcome back. In case you're just joining us, it's the Money Show. We're looking at the state of the economy this morning. Joining me right now is the president of the Abuja Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He is Tony Ejinkeonye. Welcome to the program, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, we're looking at the state of the Nigerian economy. So many sectors to talk about. You have the manufacturing sector, the trade sector, the commerce sector. I think just last week or the previous week, the penultimate week rather, the National Bureau of Statistics released numbers telling us that the foreign direct investment into Nigeria dropped by about 46% in the second quarter of the year, among other numbers which they released. President Buhari is gradually going to clock 100 days just in a few days' time. Tell me what you think about, gauge for me the business and the economic atmosphere.
Thank you for that question, but one thing I want to address is your initial comment about the foreign direct investment that reduced by 46%. First, you'll understand also that there is a global economic volatility right at this very moment. So Nigeria is not just the country or the economy facing those issues. Bankers, investment houses, they are pulling out all their investments from developing economies, unlike before. So Nigeria is just happenstance that Nigeria is one of the economies that they are pulling their investments from. Then you also mentioned about the 100 days. We are just going to clock the 100 days in office by this present regime. Yes, I will use the word alarming at this very moment, in the sense that for months now, this is a government that we had expected to hit the ground running. We've tried to encourage them. Like, I was part of the team that went to the United States with the president. There's so much expectations, not just from us businessmen in Nigeria. There's so much expectations from this very government. Everybody is on a go-go situation. What is the government going to do? And the reason that not much impact, there was an impact though, but not as much impact if ministers have been in place, because he traveled without ministers. So I believe that what this very government should quickly do is to inaugurate its ministers and actually give us a plan, their blueprint for the economy.
Okay, I like the fact that you brought out the volatility happening around the world, and I did mention it even at the beginning of the program while I was taking our viewers through the markets and what's happening, our expectations for this week, though it was a very volatile week last week all over the world. I understand that fact, but the thing is, do you think perhaps it would have been better if we had a policy direction? I've spoken to a lot of people, and of course you're also an industry stakeholder, where I was told even last week by one of my guests, off the camera, and he said he thinks that President Buhari is not sensitive to businessmen and women in Nigeria. And I was like, why? He said, can't you see it is glaring? So I understand that volatility, but would it have been a bit better if we had policy direction? You just said you expected the president to have hit the ground running.
Definitely, definitely. If there was a policy direction, and the policy of government must be, of course, be driven by his ministers. It's not the civil servants that will drive the government policy. So government has to have a policy in the first instance, have its ministers to drive that policy. Yes, it could have been better if that policy has been in place. Like, we know the Chinese, what is happening in the China economy. But immediately they start having those issues.
The government swung into action
immediately. But in our own case, there was nothing actually. We are left to our own devices. So it was like a kind of free fall, no intervention. But I may slightly disagree with you that at this early stage for us to say that he's not sensitive to business or to the industry in general. I think it's all encompassing. Every sector is affected. Every sector is affected in the economy. So, but like we in the Chamber of Commerce have reached out to government in the way we can, and the message we keep getting is, let us be patient with government. By the time they roll out their policies, that it will be to the interest of Nigerians.
Is it okay?
So let's still
hang on there.
Let's still hang on there.
After all, we've hung on for this period of time. So September is just like 24 hours away.
So we might
Who knows? President Buhari may just even surprise us 12 midnight. September 1. Who knows? I'm just saying. But are we also putting so much emphasis? Are we also a bit unfair to President Buhari? Are we putting so much emphasis on ministers? Those will be like political appointees, and it's purely
but those political appointees.
Are we saying that we don't have capable permanent secretaries that have risen to permanent secretaries in their various ministries that have known government policies all the while, perhaps since 1960?
But they have restrictions because they are civil servants. Most policies government will roll out are usually a lot of times would have to be what concerns the masses, the economy. But a civil servant, his role is just is a determined part. It's a determined part. Like in business, we call it an operational staff. Somebody that runs an office on a day-to-day basis, unlike maybe the MD or CEO of an organization that will see the big picture. So what we usually say is that the permanent secretary may not be in a position to see the big picture because he is not a politician. He is not aware of APC party manifesto. And it's those manifestos that drive the policy trusts of the government.
Okay, since we are gradually coming to 100 days of President Buhari's administration, and you said that, we should still hang on. We should still hang on there. Isn't
we don't really have a choice, do we?
We don't really have a choice, do we? Okay, still hanging on there. What kind of ministers should we expect from President Buhari? Because one would think that a lot of people are saying now, let's President Buhari just bring out his ministers. It seems that when he announces the ministers that all our problems will be solved, let's know the caliber of men and women that will be part of his cabinet. What kind of ministers that we've waited this long are we expected to see? Especially for those of us that watch the economic space, and who should be the Minister of Finance? I'm not saying who as in tell me the person, but what are the traits, what are the characteristics we're expecting from a Minister of Finance? Who should spearhead the Ministry of Trade, Industry? You understand what I mean?
Yes, I do understand. Well, first and foremost, there are 170 million Nigerians. And we in the private sector believe in the capacity of Nigerians to drive our own economy. Nigerians all over the whole world have been acknowledged that they're very good in their respective fields. They've excelled tremendously, not just in Nigeria, but in the diaspora. The people he's going to, the ministers we expect are not going to come from the moon, but of course, they'll be Nigerians. But the kind of ministers, especially us in the private sector, would want are people that have the passion of Nigeria, that have the patriotism to drive whichever policies and be consistent also in the policies government is going to lay out. So it will not just be political appointments, but from the feelers I am getting is we may likely see more of technocrats than politicians. Like you mentioned, the Ministry of Finance. So we are looking at seeing more of a technocrat than maybe a politician heading the Ministry of Finance and maybe some other key ministries. And like you also said, there is so much expectations. And it's not like maybe they will have a magic wand, but it will be a first step in realizing our economic goals.
What do you think that President Muhammadu Buhari's economic goals should be? You know, I know that the APC manifesto, I think they have 7 marshaled out plans, so to speak. But though they campaigned on 3 pillars, I guess, state of the economy, anti-corruption. What's the third one? Security. You know, so the state of the economy, I suppose, is really very integral in their policy formation and whatever thing they want to do right now. Where do you think that President Buhari should focus attention on to kickstart the economy? Yes.
Now, for us, we've already made a representation to his government. Us in the private sector, you know, what drives the economy of any country is the SMEs. Like in my chambers, 85% of our members are from the SMEs, just like in the whole world. SMEs are the engine room of any economy. So one of his priorities should be how to energize the SMEs. Secondly, the manufacturing sector. So those are the key places we believe that he should really go into. And driving the SMEs is like access to funds. Like the previous government made a lot of funds, I think 220 billion naira available to SMEs. But our take is how many of these SMEs, how many of these organizations have been able to access those funds? So one of the write-ups we did for the government was for them to stay clear from past mistakes of using maybe a supply-driven model to finance SMEs, but to use a market-driven model.
What do you mean by market-driven model?
So like now, presently, if you want to access funds from the commercial banks or access money from the SME funds that are available, government will definitely, or those finance houses will definitely ask you for a collateral. And we know how difficult it is to get a collateral. So we are insisting that through the market-driven model, the simple thing you do is simply, if I need a plastic molding machine, the bank should buy it, lease it to me. Instead of asking me for a collateral, the machine becomes a collateral. Instead of asking me to go and get a sea of gold.
But how visible would that be? So if everyone, if I need a bakery, okay, if I'm a baker and I need machines in my bakery, the bank should buy. Would they keep on like that for how many millions of MSMEs we have in Nigeria? Close to 36, 35 million
you start
MSMEs.
From, even if there are 100 million, but you start, there's always a first step. It has worked in most countries in the world. Let me give you an instance, Nancy. Like in Israel, I was at one convention outside the country. They actually told me that when the government of Israel finances SMEs, they expect about 55% failure rates. And they are ready to bear that loss. But the most important thing is the other 45 that went through helps the economy. So that is the most important thing. It's applicable all over the whole world, so we can still use that model here.
Is there a way, okay, you're saying we should tweak it from supply-driven to market-driven?
Yeah.
In terms of access to funds.
Access to funds.
But is there a way, apart from this postulation which you've given now, is there a way that we can actually tweak it more?
Yes.
Because I know that even the funds for the MSMEs now come at 9% in interest rate. Is there a way we can actually do it? I know the central bank at a time was one of the bills that was sent to the House, to the National Assembly, but I don't think that saw the light of day with the, is it the 7th Assembly now? You know, was the collateral registration. Okay, so that even for women that perhaps you need like 50,000 naira, and you have jewelries and whatever, it can be collateralized instead of saying go and bring a land somewhere and all of that. You know, so are there some other things that we can do to help small businesses in Nigeria? Because small businesses are actually
there is. Like one of the things we found out was the documentation. Most of our businessmen do not have the capacity to do a business plan. So, and those business plans, when you look at the requirements from these banks, is so rigorous that most of them do not have that capacity to do it. So that is where maybe our Chamber of Commerce comes into play, help draw up a business plan for our member. But then there are so many other requirements that they need, in your own words, to still tweak. And another thing I also have to mention is, you mentioned about the about 9% interest rate. Of course, the commercial banks charge double-digit rates, but nobody has the commercial banks render. That is why the microfinance banks come into play. And I understand some of them charge as much as 15% per month. I didn't say